Okinawa is not like anywhere else I've ever been. Hawaii definitely had spiritual energy, and you could definitely feel it on Maui. I felt it there when I was in the presence of Kahuna. Iraq had spiritual pressure, oppressive, sickening, demonic. But Okinawa was something different entirely. The island was alive with spirits. Not in a menacing way, not exactly. It was more dense, layered. Centuries of ancestors, of uh, victims of the war, of sacred sites and ancient traditions, all occupying the same space. You couldn't really walk through certain areas without feeling it. I arrived at my duty station hoping for a fresh start, and the first thing I did was try to find a church. I want you to understand, I was still trying. The angel's message was still with me. And then the kahuna's prophecy about a spiritual mission echoed in my mind. I wanted to follow God. I just needed help figuring it out. But every church I visited just felt off. Not evil, just not right. Like trying on shoes that just don't fit. I just couldn't connect. I couldn't find a community that understood the things that I had experienced and the questions I was carrying. So I made a decision that probably seems contradictory. I joined a local pagan group. Here's my logic. The online spiritual community I had been a part of since high school had Christians in it, open minded Christians who could engage with people from different paths without judgment. Maybe I could find the same thing in person. Maybe among the pagans, I'd find someone who could help me find my way back to God. Well, didn't quite work out that way, but it did lead me somewhere unexpected. The pagan group I joined did beach cleanups, and that's how we connected with a man that I'll call Tenno. He was originally from the Canary Islands, and he had made it his mission to care for Okinawa's coastline. He organized cleanups, connected with local groups, and helped us adopt a particular beach to maintain. This beach would become important, but not for the reasons any of us expected. There I am, on patrol one day, and I got a radio call from dispatch. When I get in, I have two NCOs there, and they looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. So we had a call, one of them said, and we think you're the only one that can handle it. Huh? So they explained to me that there was this teacher. He was from the Air Force, or one of the Air Force bases. He was civilian, but he had called and he was complaining about people doing strange pagan rituals at a beach, the same beach that our group had actually adopted through Tenno. So, okay, got you. So I called him back, and the teacher's story was something else. He said that there were Marines coming out to the beach every Saturday, and they had boxes. In his story, there was a single woman in charge, surrounded by men who would circle around her during ceremonies. And when he tried to approach them, he told me that the men circled him like a pack of wolves. He said that they were peeing in a sacred stream that ran from the cliffs to the ocean. So as he talked, I asked jokingly, "Are the boxes just big enough to trap spirits?" He totally was dead serious, and he said yes. So he was genuinely frightened. He insisted that he had studied Okinawan religious practices and that these people were not doing anything that he recognized. Which, okay, that little tidbit struck me a little bit as odd, because if these people in the ceremonies were Marines, what did Okinawan religion have anything to do with it? Well, I told him that on a day off, I would go out there and check it out myself. So that's that Saturday, the next Saturday that I had off, I went down to the beach and I discovered the truth was far less dramatic. One, they weren't Marines. They weren't even American. They were wearing old style BDU pants that had been phased out of the U.S. Army years ago, and by the way, were never used by the Marines as far as I'm aware. And those spirit trapping boxes, yeah, they were just lunch boxes. That's it. Just lunch boxes. They were just as disturbed by the teacher as he was by them. And yeah, that sacred stream that had the kanji sign that they were peeing in, yeah, the sign didn't even say that it was sacred. It said, don't drink. So the teacher had constructed an entire mythology around a group of people having lunch and honoring their own goddess, likely the patron goddess Amamikyo here. I reported back that there was nothing to worry about, but the incident reminded me of why I was drawn to this work. Not the MP work, but the spiritual discernment. Someone needed to be able to tell the difference between genuine spiritual phenomena and overactive imagination, between real threats and lunchboxes. So, I went to Tenno's apartment, which was within eyeshot of the beach, and when I found that he wasn't there, I left a note for him to talk with all parties involved and my phone number if he needed more details. Well, about a week later, Tenno contacted my friend who was part of the pagan group. His name was Flint. And he invited Flint, Porter, and myself out to talk about this conch shell ceremony idea he had to heal the world's waterways. Tenno's goal was to gather other spiritual dignitaries from around the Pacific Ocean, Okinawa, Hawaii, America, since it also borders the Pacific, New Zealand, Australia, and others. He asked us to represent the local military presence. Well, we agreed, and the next phase of our spiritual practices began. Through Tenno, we met a woman that I'll call Aurora. Aurora was a kahuna, not Hawaiian by birth, but trained in the tradition. She had come to Okinawa for other reasons, but Tenno convinced her to stay just long enough to lead the conch shell ceremony he was planning. My first meeting with Aurora was at a cave. I believe it was Chibichurigama, though I can't say for certain. Google Maps and memory don't always align. This cave held weight. During the Battle of Okinawa, civilians had died there, and the land remembered this. And the people were just starting to kind of open up about the trauma that the cave held in their history. So we went to perform a healing ceremony for the waterway nearby the cave and to pay honors to the Okinawan spirits which still lingered there after World War II. The intention of the conch shell ceremony we were performing here, the first of many, by the way, was to call for the waters to rise and wash away trash that accumulated. A few days later, after the rain, the water did rise, and the trash was washed away. And then Tenno's group went down to clean up the beach below. A few days later, we gathered for a larger ceremony, an opening ritual for a Fox summer beach party with spiritual dignitaries from across the Pacific. Aurora led it, which, says something about Tenno. He wasn't looking to lead, he was just looking to facilitate. So standing there, surrounded by people from different traditions, all focused on healing and reconciliation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a purpose. And I would find that Okinawa wasn't done with me yet. Months later, I'd connect the message on Maui to these events and the start of a spiritual roller coaster. And then there was also a new dream. Now I thought about not including this, but I think it might be important. So anyways, this dream foretold a plane crash in the desert. I knew from that dream that there would be a newlywed couple on board who lost their lives, and even the hour it would crash. But I knew no one on the plane or the information that could have prevented it. The day that was in my dream came, and that exact same day and that exact same hour, there was a crash. Though not in a desert, but it did have a newlywed couple. Still, there's something to know about dreams of the future. While they are biblical, they can also be deceitful. So I don't know what this dream was. Maybe the dream was deceit, or maybe it was a reminder that there's something supernatural in the world. I couldn't tell you. Anyways, let's get back to my story. Rachel. Let's talk about Rachel, because this is where her story starts developing a little bit more too. She was still with me, still talking to me when I needed guidance, but now something else was starting to happen, something I couldn't quite ignore. I was losing time. It would happen when I was stressed. I'd blink and hours would be gone. People would tell me I'd been acting strangely, that something was a little off about me. And the way they would describe my behavior during these gaps sounded an awful lot like Rachel. Then there was the incident with Flint. Now, Flint was an army medic who practiced as a servant of Isis. We'd become friends through the pagan group, and one night he tried to initiate something physical with me. Something I didn't want. He didn't rape me. Look, not like that. And you should know that the conch shell ceremony took place about a year later, so we were still very good friends after everything. After he tried to convince me it would be okay to lose my virginity, I don't remember what happened next. What I'm told by him is that Rachel took over to protect me and set a boundary. This wasn't the first time. Something similar had happened in Hawaii with someone I barely knew. And when I was there, that one, his friends next near me told me that they all tried to say that I had a mental health issue, and I passed it off. I just told him that I had made it up just to get him to back off. But anyways, so Rachel took over to protect me and set a boundary between me and Flint. So this time, my friends didn't dismiss what they were witnessing as a mental health issue, which really did change the dynamic. Flint and another friend, a Marine chaplain's assistant that I'll just call Porter, saw Rachel as a spiritual problem. Not a psychological one, not a she's a dangerous one, but one where I needed to bring her into myself. An integration, because I should be able to assert my own boundaries without needing an external source to do that. That distinction mattered. But first, let's talk about how Porter got to this conclusion on his own. So, it was Porter who first took me to a sacred tree on Kadena Air Base. The tree was old, significant. Porter introduced me to the spirit that resided there, and I refused to bow to that spirit. I was cordial, but not reverent. Ever since the angel's warning, I just didn't have the same care. As far as I was concerned, they were equals to me, deserving enough respect that I didn't need to offend them, and at least at this stage, I didn't need to be hostile. So as we left the tree, I started driving and something went wrong. My heart started racing. My third eye, that point in the forehead that practitioners talk about, began to spasm. And I was behind the wheel and I was losing control. I hit the brakes. Thankfully, it was late at night, so no one else was on the road, and Rachel took over. Porter, who was sitting in the passenger seat beside me, called Flint. Together, they directed us to a sacred spring where Porter could perform a healing. I don't remember the drive there. I don't remember much of the healing itself. I just know that when it was over, I could function again. But my third eye never fully healed. For years afterward, if someone pointed their finger at my forehead, I would get dizzy and pass out. Rachel, I'm told, would switch in and protect me whenever that happened. Well, Porter, Flint, and I went ghost hunting at some old hotel ruins. At least, that was the cover story they gave me. The real purpose was to find a cave and make an offer. Porter believed the only way to fix the Rachel situation was integration. He explained it like this: Rachel and I were fractured, two spirits sharing one body, constantly negotiating control. If I wanted to take charge of my own life, I needed to integrate her, bring the parts of her that gave me strength into myself rather than deferring to her as a separate entity. It made sense, and so I agreed to try. Flint stood at the entrance of the cave to protect us, and Porter began the ceremony. I didn't know what he said or did. I just remember the feeling of something shifting inside me, like plates moving, boundaries dissolving, like emerging, so to speak. And then Flint called out, "Something's coming." I can't quite recall if he meant something spiritual or if it was like the local police. I do remember us trying to run. They were carrying me in the sense that I was basically holding onto them while we ran out of the cave, and Flint called his Okinawan girlfriend to pick us up. By the time we got to her apartment, I was desperately dehydrated. So Flint handed me a gallon of water, and I drank the entire thing in 15 minutes. I've never consumed so much water that fast in my life, not even in army training. And then I fell asleep. When I woke up, Rachel was silent. She didn't talk to me anymore. For the rest of my time in Okinawa, that voice I relied on since childhood was simply gone. Interestingly, the glossolalia, or tongues, or whatever it was, increased. You know, that speaking in unknown sounds while I slept? My husband, whom I did meet in Okinawa, told me later it sounded less like singing and more like pleading. We actually tried to record it once to see if there was a real language there, and we never really could identify it. Some days I wish I still had that recording. Maybe AI could identify it. Who knows? If I ever do it again, maybe I'll just have it recorded. We'll see. Though I don't know if that'll ever happen. Anyways, next major ceremony that we had was Samhain. Flint had this idea, and honestly, I hated it from the start. The year before, to give some context, Flint had hosted a ceremony where he invited all the spirits, good and bad, into the circle. The rest of us had spent the entire night playing defense, keeping dark entities away from newer practitioners who didn't know how to protect themselves. The group leaders, including myself, which I was not a group leader, but including myself, had given him a very serious reprimand afterwards. Well, now he wanted to do something even more ambitious. A 24-hour ceremony to lay the restless spirits of Okinawa to rest. His plan was to call in all the gods associated with death from every tradition and have them collect the spirits that belong to them and take them to the underworld or to their home, their heaven, their whatever. He wanted me to be the priestess. Flint, I'm the Christian here, I told him. Why do you want me in charge? And he pushed, and I realized he was going to do this with or without me. If I walked away, he'd do it alone and probably get himself or someone else hurt. So I told him I'd think about it. About a month before him telling me about it, there had been a story in one of the English newspapers carried somewhere. Yeah, I really don't recall where I saw that story ran. It was about Kudaka Island. And Kudaka Island is this sacred space for the patron goddess Amamikyo. I first started by going to the sacred space on Tori Station, asking one of the spirits of that space its opinion. It told me in so many words that Amamikyo had adopted spirits who died in Okinawa to her as her family, and that it would be something Flint would need to overcome if he went forward with this ritual. So that had reminded me about the story of Kudaka Island, and I took my next day off to take a ferry to Kudaka Island and ask Amamikyo if she would bless Flint's ritual. I'll honor it if you're the priestess. So frustrated. Flint was going to go forward. The goddess basically threatened his life if I didn't stay involved, and here I was caught in the damn middle. And you know what? I just couldn't help myself. To protect my friend, my comrade, which is the warrior ethos right there, I relented. In case you're wondering, never leave a fallen comrade. I was dragged right back into their game, but here I was not fully understanding what I needed to do to be a good Christian and falling right back on what I did know, protecting people from spiritual attacks. So I went back to Flint and I set rules. First, couldn't specifically invoke the Christian god. I said, don't do that. That would create complications neither of us were prepared to handle. He agreed, but only under the context that I allow him to name a few death gods from various pantheons and then add a blanket invitation for any other god of death who wishes to participate. Okay, got it. Whatever, fine, I'll take it. As long as you don't specifically invoke him. Second, I would call the goddess of diplomacy. I chose Oshun, who is a goddess of diplomacy. Like, it's one of the things that she specifically is there for, even more so than, say, like Athena. So I called her in to help keep the peace between all the powerful beings that were going to be there. Now, on that one, Flint was very reluctant. He thought the gods would get along fine, but I talked him into it, and eventually he agreed. So we spent the next few weeks preparing. We crafted obsidian arrowheads to create a permanent gateway around the island, a pathway for spirits to exit into whatever underworld claimed them. And then one set went on a staff, and that would be like our kind of capstone piece, I guess you could say, for the gate. And the others would be placed at points around Okinawa, including Kudaka Island. So the ceremony itself took 24 hours. Flint took the northern half of Okinawa. Another friend took the eastern section, and I took the southern portion and personally placed the stone on the western side of Kudaka Island. As I was finishing my route, I found myself wishing I had someone local, someone actually from Okinawa to help bring it all together. After all, we were outsiders, gaijin. That's when a local man flagged me down and asked me for a ride. Well, he spoke just enough English to understand when I explained I needed to do something first, and then I asked him if he'd be willing to participate and meditate with me. He agreed and meditated with me as I placed the final stone. Afterward, I drove him to his destination. He thanked me for including him, and we parted ways. When I returned to close the ceremony with the group, Flint told me that his part had been treacherous. He had felt spirits constantly trying to pull him off rocky surfaces and send him into the water to a watery grave. I had felt none of that. Mine had been very peaceful, but he did make it out alive, and maybe they were angry at him for wearing a mask, which, as part of his tradition, he used to protect himself, but I couldn't help but think back and think maybe it was more that Amamikio's children felt a certain way about him, and she put me off limits. So she didn't actively try to go after him, but maybe she also didn't technically try to protect him. Listen, I wasn't a fan, but we still got through it. And so now we're getting ready to close out this whole ceremony, right? And Flint goes and he said he's going to go out on Torrey Beach, because that's where, if you don't know, Torrey Beach is where the military landed and started the Battle of Okinawa. So we were going to use this as a section to go and drop off the last staff. And we got pretty far out there in the middle of the night. It was near midnight, somewhere about like 11:30, maybe 11:45, and Flint, I just got to a point where I just felt there was something wrong. And I remembered that he had talked earlier on about how he had almost died. So I said, hold on, we need to not go to where you were going to go. And I looked out and there was a jetty that we could see from where we were. And I said, let's drive over there. Are you okay with that? And so we drove over there, and then we dropped this staff down there with everything and closed out the gate here. Somehow we all made it out alive. He made it out alive, and that was what was important to me. Then I got pregnant. Not from this incident, but like a few months later, I got pregnant, found out I was pregnant, and I ended up leaving the military, and I left Okinawa. And then a new chapter with my husband and son began. But here's what stayed with me. I had spent years searching churches in Hawaii that didn't fit, churches in Okinawa that didn't fit, a pagan group in Okinawa that taught me things but couldn't give me what I needed, ceremonies that connected me to something but not God, not the way I wanted either. And I had integrated Rachel. I had participated in rituals with kahunas and death gods and spirits of the land. I likely fulfilled the spiritual mission I had been sent out to do when I was in Maui, but here I was in the next chapter, still trying to find a way forward to follow God. I wanted to. I was trying hard, but I still couldn't find a church, and that left me alone. I am Alethea, and this is Wandering Sinai.